Autumn, 1914. The fields of France were still green, but the color was draining out of the world. The war was new, loud, clumsy, and full of belief. Men marched into it with polished boots and bright flags, still thinking courage could stop bullets. They didn't yet know that the future of war was already crouched in the mud, watching through a scope. In those early days, a raised head meant a death sentence. British and French troops had barely begun digging their trenches when they realized something was horribly wrong. A man would stand to shout an order and fall silent before his words reached the air. Another would lift a periscope, and a second later the glass would explode in his hands. No warning, no visible enemy, only the thud of a bullet finding its mark. They called it the unseen death. The Germans had learned faster. Hidden deep behind broken trees or piles of rubble, they began picking off officers, runners, anyone foolish enough to show movement. And for the first time, the Western Front went quiet. Not from peace, but from fear. No one dared look over the parapet. Even a shadow could get you killed. What was happening wasn't chaos. It was method. The German army had found a new weapon. Not a machine, not a gas, but a man. A man with patience, calm hands, and eyes made for hunting. The sniper was being born. Before the Great War, sniper wasn't a title, it was a habit. Hunters in the forests of Bavaria, gamekeepers in Austria, marksmen from the Prussian hills, they brought with them a skill older than the rifle itself. Germany and Austria-Hungary had generations of hunters who understood silence, range, and patience. They didn't need a manual to know how to wait for the perfect shot. And they had something else the Allies didn't: the finest optics on Earth. Zeiss glass, precise and cruel, could turn the battlefield into a shooting range. When British soldiers begged for magnified sights, the Germans already had them. When the Allies tried to improvise, the Germans were already killing. One private account from that first winter tells it best. A British unit was waiting for rations. A soldier leaned up to wave the runner forward, and the dirt beside his temple spat upward. No rifle crack, no echo, just the soft thump of impact and the silence of realization. They fired back wildly into the fog, but hit nothing. Later, they spotted it through a periscope, a dark knot in a shattered tree with a single round hole at its center. Not bark, not shadow, a steel plate drilled for one eye and one rifle. And somewhere behind it, a man smiled. That winter, as the cold tightened its grip, the German army made a quiet decision that would change the face of warfare. A nobleman, the Duke of Ratibor, an avid hunter, launched a campaign to collect civilian hunting rifles fitted with telescopic sights. Within months, thousands of precision rifles poured into the front lines. Gamekeepers, foresters, professional hunters, men who once stalked deer in the Black Forest were now stalking human beings across no man's land. And the effect was immediate. The Allied trenches became killing grounds. Men fell from ladders, duckboards, and firing steps without warning. A flat crack in the distance, and then nothing. Officers thought at first it was stray fire. But stray bullets don't choose heads. They don't wait for movement. This was something else. It was deliberate, calculated, personal. Some German units hung taunting signs in English over their trenches. "Hello, Tommy, show yourself." And when curiosity won and a soldier peeked to read the words, he died before finishing the sentence. Others built armored plates with coin-sized loopholes, just wide enough for a rifle barrel, but strong enough to stop a .303 round. Desperate British troops dragged massive elephant guns to the front lines, hoping their heavy bullets could punch through the plates. it rarely worked. For every German sniper killed, dozens of Allied soldiers learned a new kind of fear, one that came without warning, without sound, without mercy. Among those early hunters was Georg Herrenreiter, a Bavarian poacher turned soldier. In October 1914, he volunteered to climb a tree overlooking the French lines. From that frozen perch, he hunted men like he once hunted deer. Officers, runners, observers. He became a ghost in the branches. 2 rifles were shot apart in his hands before he was finally wounded, but he refused to climb down. By the time he was killed in 1916, Herrenreiter had over 100 confirmed kills and the Bavarian Gold Bravery Medal. His legend spread through the trenches, a story whispered at night, the woodsman who became death itself. Nobody knows exactly how many lives those early snipers took, but British battalions reported losing 10 to 18 men per day to invisible fire. Whether every kill was real didn't matter. The fear was. Men refused to show their heads. Some refused to eat unless the rations were thrown down to them. The German army had discovered something deadlier than bullets: psychological warfare. It's said that by early 1915, there was 1 German sniper for every 750 meters of front line. A web of unseen eyes stretched across France, and the Allies had no answer. Their own scoped rifles were so rare that when a unit was relieved, the sniper rifle was passed to the next battalion like a sacred heirloom. And still, the bodies fell. The new profession spread fast. In the Alps, Austrian marksmen ruled the heights. Their trenches looked straight down into Italian lines, and their hunting culture gave them a cruel advantage. The Italians scrambled to catch up, stealing designs and copying scopes in secret workshops. Orders went out to every front. If a sniper is killed, recover his rifle at all costs. The weapon had become more valuable than the man. Even in the distant sands of Gallipoli, sniping found a new home. The Ottoman sharpshooters had no scopes, but they didn't need them. From the ridgelines above the beaches, they could see everything. Movement meant death. It was here that Billy, the assassin Singh, an Australian sniper with a deadly calm, earned his name. He was credited with 300 kills, including a duel with a mysterious Turkish marksman known as Abdullah the Terrible. Their battle became legend, the first true sniper duel of modern war, 2 men hunting each other across a sea of sandbags and silence. And in the East, the story was no different. German snipers dominated, their optics turning the flat Russian plains into target ranges. One of them, Wilhelm Enz, described his work with chilling detachment. I would lie there half an hour with the scope ready until some Siberian came into view. I'd pull the trigger as if on a roebuck. The thought that he's a man, that he has a wife and child, always comes too late. The rifles had changed. The faces hadn't. The act of killing had simply become cleaner, quieter, more efficient. By late 1914, what began as improvisation became institution. 15,000 scoped Mauser rifles were ordered, manuals were written, observation pairs assigned, camouflage developed. The modern sniper, patient, precise, merciless, was no longer an accident of war. He was its evolution. By the spring of 1915, the nightmare had spread across the front. The German snipers, invisible, patient, and precise, ruled the daylight. Allied soldiers learned to move like shadows. They crawled instead of walked, whispered instead of spoke. Even the simple act of lighting a cigarette could summon death from beyond the wire. But war, like nature, forces adaptation. If one side masters silence, the other learns to listen. The British Army, humiliated and bleeding, began to change. In the shattered fields of Flanders, a few stubborn officers refused to accept that the enemy's eyes would always be sharper. Among them was a man named Vernon Hesketh Pritchard, a restless, relentless thinker who stalked the halls of Army headquarters, arguing that sniping wasn't luck or savagery, it was craft. It could be learned, taught, perfected. He fought bureaucracy harder than he fought the Germans, but the trench deadlock left no choice. The war was stuck, and to move forward, someone had to learn how to see. At first, the British response was chaotic. Every regiment tried something different. Some recruited hunters from the Scottish Highlands, men who could hit a stag's eye at 300 yards. Others scavenged scopes from broken rifles or bought civilian hunting gear from London stores. The early British snipers looked like ghosts, wrapped in sandbags, dirt, and desperation. They worked from holes in walls, from collapsed cellars, from the bodies of dead horses. They learned to wait, to count breaths, to shoot not at the man, but at the flicker of movement that betrayed him. Slowly, painfully, order emerged from improvisation. By the summer of 1916, the first British School of Sniping, Observation, and Scouting opened its gates. The training was brutal, not in sweat, but in silence. Recruits learned to judge range by the size of a helmet, to measure wind by the drift of a scrap of paper, to read the earth, to know where the enemy's bullet would land before it was fired. A single mistake could mean death, not only for the sniper, but for the men beside him. There was no room for panic, no noise, no second chances. The British manual, the Scouting and Patrolling Handbook, was a masterpiece of cold precision. It listed 4 purposes for the sniper's art: inflict casualties, gather intelligence, boost friendly morale, destroy enemy courage. Notice the balance: death and morale in the same breath. To kill was not enough. The sniper's bullet had to break the mind of those who survived. The Canadians went further. Their doctrine stated it plainly: to shake the enemy's morale, to cause casualties, to prevent the enemy from working, to retaliate against his snipers. Each bullet was a message, each shot a warning. You are never safe. Most of the day was spent watching, not shooting. Snipers learned to read light, to know when the dawn softened shadows enough to hide the glint of glass. They studied how a rifle's wooden stock expanded in damp weather, how a single drop of oil could shift the aim by inches. Their rifles were sacred. Manuals warned, do not tamper with the sight, leave adjustments to the armorer. A scope wasn't just glass, it was the sniper's second soul. Each team consisted of 2 men, a shooter and an observer. The observer tracked movement, calculated distance, and corrected aim. He recorded every shift of wind, every shimmer of heat, every ripple in the enemy's trench. If the shooter fell, the observer's first duty wasn't to grieve, it was to recover the rifle. A sniper's death was personal. His weapon was eternal. Camouflage became art. The French, with their painters and designers, led the revolution. Their camouflage ateliers built dummies, fake carcasses, and hollow sandbags. They made trees that weren't trees, iron shells with hidden ladders inside. The British followed, refining the deception. Engineers built decoy heads from papier-mâché to lure enemy fire. When a German sniper revealed his position by shooting at the fake, the real shot answered. The duel began. 2 men, each unseen by the other, trading patience for blood. From the wilds of Scotland came another idea: the first ghillie suits. Gamekeepers and stalkers stitched them from burlap, moss, and heather. Worn in the field, they turned men into shadows of the earth itself. When the fog rolled in, a man in a ghillie suit didn't exist. He was rumen, rock, grass. The enemy might stare straight at him and never see. By 1915, Germany had institutionalized what Britain was still learning. They trained Scharfschützen, specialist marksmen in dedicated schools. They issued 15,000 scoped Mausers, each one a tool of quiet terror. Their manuals taught camouflage, range finding, and the use of paired observation. They weren't hunters anymore. They were scientists of death. And yet the Allies were catching up. Optics factories in England began to hum. Steel plates were tested, loopholes redesigned. Observation posts became fortresses of patience. Every trench sector developed its own rhythm, a heartbeat measured not by artillery, but by single shots echoing over the mud. The British discovered a strange paradox. The best snipers weren't the loudest or the bravest. They were the quiet ones, the calm ones,
Men who could lie still for 6 hours under rain, waiting for a single careless movement, and then kill without hesitation. As one veteran wrote later, "We became shadows that whispered and led. I no longer fired at men, I fired at outlines, at the suggestion of life." But the transformation wasn't only mechanical, it was human. Ion Idris, an Australian sniper in Palestine, described the electric terror of being hunted. "The respect you gain from a Turkish sniper when a bullet smacks within an inch of your jaw is thrilling." That line captures the strange intimacy of sniper warfare. The respect, the fear, the cold admiration between predators. For some, sniping was salvation, a way to control the chaos. For others, it was damnation. One German marksman, Ignaz Halm, wrote home with pride, "I have been assigned a wonderful job. I am now a sniper. When I spot an Englishman who raises his head, it is my duty to shoot him." Duty, routine, detachment. The morality had gone silent. By 1916, sniping had evolved from scattered instinct into doctrine. Each army had schools, rules, and rituals. A sniper's work became both craft and curse, part of a machine that turned patience into power. Factories built scopes by the thousands. Camouflage depots mass-produced hides and netting. Manuals were rewritten. And on both sides of the front, a new breed of soldier watched the world through glass, measuring life and death by fractions of an inch and the rhythm of a heartbeat. For them, war was no longer noise and movement. It was waiting. It was the stillness before a single breath. The sniper had become something beyond soldier, beyond hunter. He was a surgeon of silence, and in the frozen geometry of the trenches, silence was the most dangerous weapon of all.
By late 1916, the front was no longer a battlefield. It was a graveyard of whispers. Every crater, every rusted helmet, every piece of twisted wire hid something, a story, a body, or a man with a scope trained on the horizon. The war of thunder and fire had given birth to something quieter, crueler, the war of ghosts. No man's land, that stretch of ruined earth between the trenches, had become a hunting ground. It wasn't measured in yards anymore, but in seconds of survival. If you moved, you died. If you breathed too loudly, someone, somewhere, might hear you through glass and steel. The snipers now hunted each other. It wasn't just soldier versus soldier, it was mind versus mind. Each day began with a question that gnawed at every sniper's thoughts. Who is watching me right now? Counter-snipers became the most feared of all. Their entire existence revolved around detecting the unseen. They studied the sun's reflection on glass, the outline of a loophole, the faint distortion of heat above a rifle barrel. A glint, a flicker, a movement no bigger than a blink, that was all they needed. In that instant, the duel was decided. One bullet, one breath, two ghosts, but only one would vanish forever. Some men began to name their unseen rivals. They gave them nicknames, almost with affection. The Watcher, the Butcher of Lens, the Owl. They never saw these enemies face to face, but over months of deadly exchanges they learned their rhythms, how long they waited, how quickly they fired, how they baited their targets. It became personal, a chess game played in mud and silence, where every move could be your last. One British sniper, Corporal Francis Pegamagabau, a Canadian of Ojibwe descent, became a living legend. He moved through the trenches like smoke, invisible, methodical, and utterly fearless. By the end of the war, his confirmed kills numbered in the hundreds, though he rarely spoke of them. When asked how he did it, he simply said, "You learn to see differently, to see without looking." Across the lines, German snipers like Matthias Hetzenauer became equally infamous. They carried notebooks filled with wind readings, range tables, and sketches of enemy positions, proof that by now, sniping had become both art and science. But what united all of them, friend and foe alike, was the silence after the shot. That frozen heartbeat where life ended and time stopped. The technology of killing evolved alongside the psychology of it.
Fake helmets with mirrors were used to spot enemy positions. Periscopes replaced direct observation, allowing soldiers to scan without exposing their heads. The British even experimented with periscope rifles, crude but effective, letting them fire from cover without showing a single inch of flesh. The deception grew more elaborate. Dead animals were hollowed out to hide scopes. Bodies of fallen soldiers became observation posts. Every object, a shovel, a tree stump, even a puddle, could be a trap. In this world, trust died first. Only instinct survived. By 1917, the lines blurred between man and machine. Snipers were no longer just killers. They were eyes of the army. They reported troop movements, located enemy guns, and called in artillery fire. A single sniper could hold down an entire sector, freezing dozens of men in fear. The manuals of every army now taught not just how to shoot, but how to think. Camouflage wasn't just about hiding. It was about becoming invisible in the mind of the enemy. A well-hidden sniper didn't just escape sight. He erased himself from imagination. That was the true mastery. When the enemy forgot to fear you, that's when he died. But for the men behind the scopes, the cost was heavy. Sleep became impossible. The silence of the battlefield followed them home, echoing in dreams. Many described a peculiar madness, a hyper-awareness that never faded. Every glint of sunlight on a window, every reflection in water felt like a scope aiming back at them. They had learned to see death everywhere, and that vision didn't end with the war. One anonymous sniper's journal, found years later, ended with a single haunting line. "I stopped believing in God the moment I realized I was playing his role." When the armistice finally came in November 1918, the snipers were among the last to rise from their positions. They emerged like ghosts from burrows, blinking in disbelief at the sound of silence. For years their lives had been defined by stillness and aim. Now, there was nothing left to aim at. Some couldn't stop watching. They returned home and sat by windows for hours, scanning the horizon for enemies that would never come. Others turned to hunting, unable to live without the precision, the patience, the thrill of control. And many simply never spoke again. The legacy they left behind reshaped warfare forever. The lessons of the trenches became blueprints for every modern sniper program. The American Marines, the Soviet Red Army, even small commando units in later wars all trace their roots back to the mud, the fear, and the brutal innovation of 1914 to 1918. Scopes improved, rifles evolved, but the essence remained the same: patience, observation, calculation, and that cold moment of decision when a heartbeat becomes history. Modern snipers from Stalingrad to Afghanistan still carry the ghost of those trench soldiers in their discipline, in their silence, and in the unseen war they fight. More than a century later, the idea of the sniper still fascinates us, not because of the killing, but because of what it reveals about human nature. It is the ultimate contradiction: control in chaos, precision in madness, silence in destruction. The sniper is not the loud hero of the battlefield. He is the quiet witness, the one who sees too much, knows too much, and carries that weight forever. The First World War didn't just invent modern sniping. It created a new kind of soldier, a hybrid of hunter, mathematician, and ghost. And though the trenches are long gone, his shadow still waits in the ruins. Steady breath, steady aim, eyes like glass, heart like stone.